The 25th of May, 2022. It's Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, as well as go to my website, www.susanmeetling.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. Make sure to like my official YouTube videos and share the link to my official YouTube videos. So I was listening to The Five, and I also was listening to the Greg Gutfeld show, or Gutfeld, I think is what it's called now. Nonetheless, that has to probably do with certain bureaucracy in reference to legalities and copyright situations. As far as that's concerned, I'm gonna guesstimate in regards of how it used to be the Greg Gutfeld show and now it's Gutfeld with the exclamation point. I'm not certain. I'm gonna guesstimate that though. So I was listening to The Five, where there were, I know for a fact, I'll put the link in the section of the information for this in reference to, I know it was Judge Janine, as well as Miss Dana Perino, and then Gutfeld, and then I think it was Jesse Waters. I know I've listened to this female who was also on The Five. I just can't remember her name. I do apologize. However, they were talking about President of the United States of America 46, Joe Biden, as well as Vice President of the United States of America 48, Kamala Harris, both of these particular YouTube clips. Again, I'll put the links so that way you can refer to them, which is an irony if you take in consideration my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmeetling.com, also www.ladydorybell.com, and you would be capable to see in a prior official journal blog of mine that kind of goes over this in a bit of a instructional way, or an instructional way, regarding certain factors, though in reference to my official YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in again, and certain references regarding. So, because this era with the technology and how technology has made certain things a bit easier in various references, pun intended, and yet at the same time there are certain situations where how do you bring forward certain factors for those clarifications as to details, so that way there are those capabilities for individuals who are interested in looking through what specific aspects to bring that information forward. So in reference to a metaphor regarding what The Five and then Gutfeld show was discussing regarding how some have been calling Joe Biden in reference to the baby formula situation. So I'm going to go a little bit in a different direction, though along certain situations. So those who did not know in regards to Joseph and Megan Estes, and yet had attended Club Sapphire, the lighting in regards to Club Sapphire would be similar to when I had known Joseph and Megan Estes, as far as their bedroom, the type of lighting in that regard, not necessarily the LED candles, more along the lines of the lights that were along the ceiling for that reference point. Anybody who has seen their two-story house, if I remember correctly, as to that, would know that particular detail if you had that capacity. Now, in reference to the baby formula. So, well, you know, some situations and certain hypotheticals regarding when the end of that particular, it was a relationship-ish, as far as when I had dated Joseph and Megan Estes at that particular point in time, though unlike possibly what they had in mind in comparison to what I had in mind, would be a massively huge difference. So while the two of them were married and they were looking at different capacities, I myself was not looking at hypothetically what they were looking at. And so in those time frames, especially regarding 2012, so you have to take in consideration I had been awake from my coma, from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 for about 12 years, give or take some factors. Then I had already earned my 26 scuba diving certifications in the year of 2009 and had worked on several situations, which I had only been above the area from where I had descended and surfaced alive safely in reference to the Vandenberg area regarding what I call the Matthias Abyss, where I had specifically landed because of where I specifically landed. Not in reference to the Vandenberg, obviously I was at the Vandenberg. When I refer to where I specifically landed in my 3-volume book series, The Adventures of Susan Mealing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, which you can go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydoribell.com, where I actually landed in what apparently is considered a trench by the scientific definition. Where I specifically landed, I call that the Matthias Abyss, in homage to General Jim Mattis, because of I like the way he has a smidgen of an attitude. I also have a thing for Marines, and so it is in the Marine area. And so since General Hoyt Vandenberg had been more associated with, yes, the Navy and the Air Force, I have a thing for Marines. And so I decided that I was going to name that area the Matthias Abyss. And it's my choice because I landed there. And that's the fact. So it is as it is. Nonetheless, in the reference to 2012, well, that was 3 years, though realistically it wasn't even 3 years from the time frame of that particular scuba dive. It was actually around the time of 2.5 years from that particular scuba dive. Then you have the year before in regards to Irving in the year 2011, and by that point in time, it was less than a full year from the first situation in that particular reference to Irving, which there are very few pictures of me during the time frame in the year of 2011, mainly because, not so much in reference to my scuba diving, more in reference to because of the situations regarding Irving in the year of 2011. So while I had completed my performance regarding Exotic Easter at Temple of Flesh, I personally couldn't handle certain things because of the Irving situation in 2011. Since the situations during the time frame as to 2009, not just in reference to my own scuba diving, though in reference to certain regards to the Gulf of Mexico scuba diving in 2009, I had made attempts to get assistance in the first portion regarding the individual who had caught a poofy fish, though in the secondary aspect regarding myself, not because of anything other than the Vandenberg scuba dive compared to the scuba dives in the Gulf of Mexico area, because of my personal concern regarding the individual who had caught a poofy fish, or puffer fish by scientific, well, it's not even by scientific standards, by the common name factor, I call them poofy fish because I am as I am. Anyway, in that particular reference as to 2012, I hadn't discussed what had occurred regarding Irving because of the situations in reference not only to my scuba diving, though what was going on in regards of my daughter and my son and I as a family. And so since what occurred in reference to the Fort Worth Zoo after McCoy Elementary School and Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District, and the situations I was dealing with in the general aspects, whether in reference to social media responses or lack thereof, and including regarding the attempts to contact law firms and get assistance that way. I had been contacting through the ombudsman in that reference as well, and other attempts for those particular factors because of what was going on in reference to my daughter. So it wasn't that my scuba diving didn't matter, it wasn't that the situation regarding the poofy fish didn't matter, it did. However, in the in-person, face-to-face in-person is the equivalent regarding what I had done online in reference to the attempts for my daughter regarding McCoy Elementary School and the Fort Worth Zoo. So at the time frame of June through essentially, so June 2009 into the end of December 2009, as well as January 2010, because of the area that I was in, through to about March or April 2010, I would randomly discuss with people, though it was in person, face to face in person, regarding the poofy fish situation. And since the way that particular aspect had gone during the in-person, face-to-face in-person, realistically, even though it was a very short and condensed amount of time, you can take in consideration July 2019 through about August of 2019 as to any of the in-person, face-to-face, in-person attempts to have discussions, including an additional trip to the area of Carrollton, Texas in 2020, I believe, for that particular reference. And so while I had made multiple attempts as to the in-person, face-to-face, in-person discussions, because that's the only way you can have a discussion is in-person, face-to-face, in-person. While yes, you can have the messaging back and forth, the capability to have a swifter response regarding an actual discussion in comparison to messages is obviously much faster in person, face to face, in person. And so whether or not people remember from those particular points in time regarding June 2009 through December of 2009, which at that point I was volunteering at International Scuba while also going through the different aspects of my preparations regarding my scuba dives for the area out in the Atlantic area of the ocean. I had made multiple attempts to actually speak with people directly in International Scuba and the connected portions of. You can even take into consideration in reference to certain discussions regarding 2010 as to the poofy fish, regarding even in certain regards as to the time frame of the corona situation where I defended myself. Even though that individual and I had not, whatever you want to call that, because it wasn't an official relationship. However, we had gone out to a few locations, and while some people from International Scuba may have seen us together and or scuba toys, I wouldn't actually know, because I wouldn't know the scuba toys individuals the way that particular person would, and the way that was as it was. Again, if it wasn't an embarrassment of being with me, in my opinion, because obviously somebody who wouldn't be embarrassed to be with me wouldn't want to hide that. However, despite certain things after having returned from the Cozumel scuba dive trip, Sally and Jeff Waters would obviously most likely have seen the way the situations were in comparison to the time frame. Same thing in reference to Joy, because of that particular factor, whether or not that individual had realized that and or recognized that and or knew any of the other people that were in the area during that particular situation, I wouldn't know. So that's something that individual would have to take in consideration in comparison to myself. It just is the facts. Nonetheless, in regards to the year of 2012 and Joseph and Megan Estes, as to the Taco Cabana situation being the last time I had been willing to spend any time with them, and I have written about it after not really any discussions because of how I personally am. So I haven't dated many people in an overall way. I wasn't allowed to date until I biologically turned 16 years old. And the few individuals that I had dated before I had my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, I was not willing to be the way certain people were at the time frame of. I know about emotional aspects, and I didn't want that to impede on certain factors because of knowing those particular types of situations. I can be emotional, though I do what I can to not have that impact the other areas. And so while people in Illinois, for this particular reference, whatever their opinions might be, I just am not that type of person. I didn't have the luxury when I was growing up as a child and a teenager to actually be allowed to have emotions. So in those references, I would actually have to hide in order to go through my emotions, because anybody who's met my biological father. And so I was raised where crying is considered a weakness. And then there's my biological mother, and any time of making any attempt to actually discuss anything, which anybody who's ever met her and ever made attempts to discuss anything, she tends to get emotional instantly, and then it becomes the equivalent of a pissing contest, for lack of a better set of words, and my biological sister being no different. And so being in that particular situation as a child and a teenager, it just became very evident to me that if I wanted to go through the whatever as far as that was concerned, there were no people I could actually speak with due to what I dealt with as a child and a teenager because of those factors. So I simply had given up making any attempts to actually go over that. Yes, it was reinforced because of my son and my daughter and not wanting them to have to go through what I had noticed people in Asher Holmes Elementary School and Marlboro Middle School go through when their parents had gone through either separations and or divorces. I didn't want my son and my daughter to have to deal with that. So even though other situations were as they were regarding extended aspects to my son and my daughter's biological factors, I was not willing to be that mom regarding those needless problems impacting. If other people chose to do certain things at the tiniest portion, my son and my daughter would know that I did not do what my ex-in-laws hypothetically did, and or my own biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, because I was not willing to be that type. because of Asher Holmes Elementary School and Marlboro Middle School, to a degree St. John Vianney High School, though the realistic factor is my biological father is as he is. My biological mother is as she is, and my biological sister is as she is. So any attempts to ever at all discuss anything that was emotional for me was just futile and worthless as a child, because those people were as they were. Same thing in regards to Old Tenet Presbyterian Church congregants. It was worthless for me to make any attempts because they were as they were. So their viewpoints were as they were. Same thing in any other situation. So by the time of Illinois in 1998 and 1999, there was no point for me to make any attempts to go into any emotional factors because I was in high school and I knew about hormones. So I wasn't willing to be a part of that sort of situation. Same thing after, as I said, my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. So the very few that I had dated from the time I turned 16 years old biologically through to the time of my going into the Army, the very, very few, I hadn't had any luxury throughout my childhood or teenage years by that point to ever discuss with anybody that would have been considered a friend or family because of how those factors were. And anybody who's met the individuals that I refer to, you know how it is. Or was, depending on the time frame. So then, by the time of waking up from my coma, there realistically wasn't anybody that I could actually, and it was reinforced because of the way Mike and Anna were, as far as during the first and second separation and final separation aspects. They just were as they were. There was no point for me to bother because they were no different than before my head injury when I was a child and a teenager. Anytime I made a genuine attempt to explain something that was important, it just wasn't worth my time to even bother because of how they were. And so those who have had interactions with them, they know, or you know, as far as I just didn't have that luxury as a child or a teenager or a biological adult. So then when it comes to the few, though more, since from the time of biologically turning 16 years old to being a biological adult, there just wasn't that capability. And I wasn't about to be one of those people on social media because I had already grown up the way I did, and doing that just, it seemed pointless because why not just speak with the individual in person, face to face in person? Because anybody, and this is my opinion when it comes to social media, if you're willing to go and do that sort of stuff in the online factor and you haven't made genuine attempts to actually discuss anything, you're just attention seeking, and I don't have patience for that. Because I was not in a relationship with someone online, and even if there were certain discussions online in the social media spectrum, I'm not that type of a person. So in person, face to face in person is the only option I personally allow, because that's how a relationship is. And so while some people have whatever viewpoint they have, which to me is no different than high school, though online, I personally just don't have the patience for that. And because of what I was personally dealing with from the time of getting onto social media, well, there just realistically wasn't any patience regarding myself to other aspects because of what I was personally dealing with. So while I could go into detail of certain sectors and in great amount of detail. I was not willing to go into the emotional capacity until more recently regarding my updates through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmelane.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, mainly because of everything else that was going on at the time. So I figured when I had the sensation to go through it myself, as far as the multitude of, that was when I was going to do so. Since I did not allow myself to do so beforehand, when I chose to do so was when I chose to do so. And since I had established, essentially, in my opinion, regarding from 2019 even to this year in 2022, since I established that, yeah, sure, I was dealing with what I was dealing with, I didn't ever go into the emotional aspects. I didn't go into my feelings or anything of that sort, because there were so many more important things for me to take care of directly, especially depending on the year. So in regards of the relationship factor, as far as the poofy fish, well, there was no knowledge to other people in person, face to face in person, or online. I wasn't willing to go into that. It just wasn't going to happen as far as that was concerned, because I'm not that type of a person. And while some people that I knew in person, face to face in person, knew that I was dating-ish that particular individual, I was not willing to discuss my emotions with those individuals because they're my ex-in-laws. And so my ex-in-laws, why would I discuss with my ex-in-laws at a fairly early time to their dead relative in regards of a new relationship, despite the fact that they had the knowledge regarding how the garage situation and Cactus Jack and that problem, nonetheless, they knew about that. And so I wasn't willing to go into it at all. They knew about how their dead relative was when he was alive. They know the fact that my head injury happened on Palm Sunday in 2000. They know I delivered my son 1.5 years after waking up from my coma. They know I delivered my daughter 2.5 years after waking up from my coma. They may or may not have remembered that I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. That doesn't matter. They know I was in a coma. They know I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. That was all that they needed to know. That's realistically it. So as far as common sense, obviously. So then in regards of who I was engaged to twice, there was, to a degree, some emotional aspect I will acknowledge, though it was also in part in reference to safety because of the factors of the lack of background training having been put into writing in reference to my proposal at that particular point in time. That is mainly the factors of. I don't deny the situations as far as the emotional factors, but the main fact was, even though it was on FetLife and even though there were certain situations, my particular background I had not gone into in that particular reference. It was known to some people that I had been involved with the Dominant Mentor program. However, I personally was not willing to do certain things and be responsible in those capacities because the background being needed to be known because of, especially when you take in consideration how certain types of like the Tide Pod and the cinnamon situation and that viral millennial thing sort of stuff. And so I didn't want to be responsible for that. And so it was, was as it was. And then, then there's the situations of who I had been a mentor to, and this is the perfect example of, he had posted something, I had seen it, and I contacted him because instead of that teenage situation, in my opinion, it's better to be direct and to the point and actually have discussions if possible. If not, I still have the right, especially now regarding 2019 through 2022, because of quite a few other factors, for the verifications and clarifications, since the hypotheticals of quite a few factors. So then when you take the additional thought process as to Patrick and that, well, then you have those situations. And then the color of the sign, not only, so you, in reference to the lighting on the interior of Club Sapphire in the dance floor area, as well as the back bedroom areas, you have the lighting regarding Joseph and Megan Estes and their house. The exterior sign in regards of Club Sapphire, the color of, has to do with a tie that is something that Patrick had worn in reference to a white shirt, because if you know what the building looks as in the review now in 2022. So if in those particular references regarding those situations where it's just that childish hinting instead of being a biological adult and having maturity to actually have discussions instead of being an adult with maturity and having discussions, going and doing that sort of garbage, similar to the Guardian Asshole Show is what it was supposed to be called, through my original Facebook account, which this is the secondary account regarding the L.D.Bell, as far as that's concerned. However, the first two original accounts that I had, because they didn't have the page situation, was, it's Susan B. Ling, though Dark Lily at that particular point. And then I did have Lady Dory Bell as well, except I forgot my password. And since I've been having issues, as I've made attempts, I did handwritten letters to various locations, including AT&T, and I guess I forgot I had to do that in a different way. Anyway, I've made attempts regarding Google or Gmail as far as handwritten letters to my original email address, susan.mealing@gmail.com, and then the particular aspects of the Y-mail now is what it's called, so on and so forth. And so I've made attempts in those regards. However, I've also not hidden the after effects of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. So there are those factors. But, because of IP addresses and the registration of specific devices and so on and so forth, there are ways, especially when you take in consideration the merger that's coming up on the 6th of June 2022 between T-Mobile and Sprint, and some of my prior official YouTube video explanations, as well as my journal blog, The Ordinary PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. There are certain explanations that I've brought forward. So, if similarly to how Patrick, when dating at the time, which he didn't know about the situations regarding Irving and those factors that I personally dealt with, he also knew that I had done scuba diving, he just didn't know any of the aspects of. So then there were the problems that he decided to go and look at my computer and think that that would be intelligent in comparison to what would actually be intelligent, which would be actual discussions with me, and that leather vest problem in comparison to what I actually would prefer. So if there's some sort of, so, you know, if he thought that that was an actual, whatever that would be, I don't know. It wasn't, because I'm not that type of a person. Not in any offense to whatever people do. When I choose to put something in a saved category area, it doesn't necessarily mean or translate to the purchasing of. That goes into where you would have to actually speak with me. Because if you think that that's what that is, there's a problem. I suppose that's a different version of artificial intelligence, because if in similarities regarding Fat Life and those factors, or even in reference to Facebook, how Facebook has the, you know, likes and whatever regarding different movies or those particular factors, that's not, I don't know what other people do. I don't do things most likely the way other people do. So I don't know what other people do in those regards. How I choose to do my favorites lists or my saved lists or whatever that is regarding, even in regards of purchasing aspects, unless I actually specifically say this is a preference or this is what I prefer. But now that I have my website, www.susanmealing.com and or www.ladydorybell.com, unless I actually put it in there, well, it's similar to my social media. If I actually wanted the specific material possession objects, I would put it there. So in that reference of back on social media during those years, I had brought up what was important to me. So that was my son and my daughter. That was important to assist in comparison to material objects. Obviously. So while some people may have whatever opinion they have, that's their opinion. That's why it's important to actually have discussions. Because if you assume that that's the way to go, and you have the opportunity, whether it's through the message system regarding whether it's Facebook or FetLife, it doesn't matter. Now you have my to contact form regarding my website. That's a very simple way in comparison to what assumptions that hypothetically would be. So in that reference of that leather vest, in comparison to what I was actually looking at stuff for, that would be a massive failure in that reference. So in a similar situation, though different, regarding Joseph Estes, well, he, along with Megan Estes, with their two daughters, while my daughter was in the hospital and my son we went to SeaWorld. And so if it's in that hinting way in comparison to being mature adults and having actual discussions where you utilize audible words to have an actual discussion as mature people would do, in comparison to childish stuff such as hinting, the equivalent of when I was literally a child, although apparently I was even more intelligent in this hypothetical, keys, car, McDonald's, French fries. Quite direct, quite to the point, no hesitations. That's so much more intelligent to me, despite I acknowledge my own biases because I was a child and I was the one who did it. However, that sort of other stuff doesn't do anything in that capacity. That's actually an annoyance. That, honestly, that was part of the end of the relationship with Patrick. There were a combined set of events. That particular aspect of realizing in reference to my computer and that garbage, that was strike one for him. Strike two for him was in reference to the fact that he actually purchased a leather vest for me without even discussing with me. Strike three for him was when he called me a stupid bitch in front of my son after I picked up pizza. Strike four for him was the shotgun situation. That was the end of it. I was done. So he might have whatever opinion he has, though I am very particular. And so with those particular situations, strike five, although put it in the correct order, was wrongfully being blamed for his choice to use the Bank of America basement phone line to call me, and then him blaming me for his choice to call in comparison. He dialed the phone number. That was his fault, obviously. Even if I called in, the fact is, I didn't know until being there that it was that particular phone type. So those particular 5 situations, on top of several others, those 5 main ones were the reasons when it came to, I don't have patience for this. I require a certain level of maturity, and if you don't have that minimum level of maturity, I don't have patience for that. So my choice to leave because of my right to choose. And since my son and my daughter's safety and their lives are far more important than that particular individual, then obviously I'm going to make the best choices I possibly can for my son and my daughter, which was known at the time of what I was dealing with. Of course, I'm going to do the best possible choices for myself as well. However, both of them having been minors, doing the best I can as their only mom. I'm the only one who carried them in my uterus. I am the only one who delivered them after labor. I am the only one that is their mom. Period, and end of story. So in that particular reference regarding those needless problems, well, we weren't even dating that long. Realistically, it was March or April into January of the following year, and I was done. So it wasn't even a full 12 months of dating. And there were other situations which he had brought up regarding social media aspects and tried to utilize it regarding Club Femme events in comparison. And so what he had brought up were outfits he had seen me wear in online as far as my modeling, because I know what I wore to each event. I know better. I know that I was doing my modeling and posting the pictures as I was online. So in reference to my outfit at an event, well, I know what I wore per event for an overall aspect. So what he had described, claiming that it was at a Club Femme event in 2009 or 2010 in the DFW area at the time of, well, that was literally, I think, just before the shotgun situation. And so, no, that was a problem, in my opinion. And so then you have the situations regarding Joseph Estes and Megan Estes. And Joseph Estes and Megan Estes and I met at the first time that I know of at Mike and Patty's. I don't know if there was another time because I didn't ask and it wasn't brought up. However, that started the way it did over several weeks into several months. And in comparison, we didn't date very long, especially compared to the prior aspect. Those situations went the way they did. I've explained this regarding how Joseph seemed to think he had a right to discuss with his wife in comparison to discussing with me. So anybody who's been in the swinger lifestyle, there is the knowledge that you discuss with what the comfort level is. And if you don't meet the standards of, you accept the fact that you don't meet the standards of. And so my requirement was speaking with both of them at the same time. Since each of them wanted to do one at a time in comparison to actually at the same time, anybody who's been in the swinger community knows that that is a problem from the start. And so in reference to Taco Cabana, where Joseph Estes thought it would be acceptable for Megan to speak with me in comparison to what I clearly informed was the mandatory aspect, otherwise it was not going to occur. That's the end of the relationship at that point in time. I gave one more chance to allow them to have a discussion because they were more BDSM. They hadn't really been involved in the swinger community. Whatever experiences they had in reference to Temple of Flashes, whatever experiences they had before the time frame I had been involved. And since I am a dominant, I'm a leather dominant no less, and being what's considered a unicorn in the swinger community, as far as not being in a relationship with anybody, not dating anybody at that point in time, there is no aspect whatsoever in any capacity that would ever be allowed without my particular specifics being met. If those specifics are not met, there's no reason for that to go forward regarding those types of situations. That goes similarly regarding the leather vest situation to the aspects of actual relationships because of the type of person I am. I do not tolerate certain things because I have the right to choose. If you involve yourself needlessly regarding certain factors, then I shut things down. And I will not open things up without that clear understanding and acceptance of that, because it doesn't matter to me in the same capacities it does to others. I will keep things shut down as long as I don't have what I need for the minimum standards. If those minimum standards are not met, I don't care how long I keep things shut down. At all. It means nothing to me regarding certain types of certain situations. So where Joseph started crying and got completely, so for those who've met Anna and Patricia, that's the way Joseph Estes was crying, but he's a biological male. And so I don't do well with that. at all. I can, to a degree. So for my son that I gave birth to and my daughter that I gave birth to, yeah, I could be a mom. To a situation in regards to a different factor, yeah, I can be not mom, but protective and understanding and sympathetic, but not a mom. And so, in comparison, although mom-ish, but not, yeah, I could dry the tears and, help you fix your makeup and stuff, no big deal. It's fine, it is what it is. But I'm not gonna cuddle you. And so, that's just, how it is. Cause, I know how to have emotions. It's just, I don't usually show them. And so then, as far as I haven't ever had a relationship where a male actually that I was dating, especially in the willing aspect, in the willing dating aspect, there's no male who ever started crying during a discussion with me, as far as the way any end of that particular aspect was. There's nobody who did that. So other than Joseph Estes, well, he had his wife to coddle him. That's not my job. We were in their house. So, in comparison, why should I go? It's known I'm a leather dominant. It's known I graduated the Dominant Mentor program. There. So, I found a Mimi. That's he could go to his wife for a hug, similarly to, going to McDonald's for some... they've picked up their food differently, that's fine. But then, expecting only salads at McDonald's, no. I could use that reference at this point. Nonetheless, it literally is one of those. They explained to me how that arrangement was. So, by technicalities, I suppose, pun intended, as to how the children came about. So by technicalities, that's accurate as far as the description is concerned. And so, again, that was her job. That's not mine. No. That was her job. That wasn't my job at all. And then there's that'd be that male, although I don't know. So if he were to go to Mike and cry, I don't know. Well, did Mike make him cry? Because, if you want something to cry about, then there's that. I grew up with that saying. I know what that saying is because I grew up with that, So, I shed one tear. You want something to cry about? It would literally, literally, as a 4-year-old, literally, one tear, and that was the saying that came out of my biological father's mouth. Yeah, no. Excuse me for running in the backyard accidentally stepping on a piece of wood that you're, cutting up and stuff like that has several prongs of rusty nails. And then it smacked straight into my leg. Excuse me for having, because according to my biological father, that was considered being overly emotional, having a wooden board that had rusty nails sticking out of my calf. And then, because that was considered emotional, then when it was ripped out of my calf, because they were like, it was multiple, and then I had the nerve. According to Mike and Anna, I was an impossible child, because how dare I cry out loud because I said ow. And apparently I wasn't supposed to feel that. And I was considered a weak child because that was considered a weakness for having that ripped out of my leg. And then, the saying of, if you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about. Well, could have used hydrogen peroxide. Could have used alcohol. Nope, 1980s iodine. For those who, yeah, I'm not asking it. This is why. So, just pointing that out there, it just is as it is. So there's this tattoo right here. This tattoo right here. Yeah, I didn't cry. I was glad I learned how to do yoga before this particular tattoo, specifically the second session. However, this particular tattoo right here, I didn't cry. So for those who don't know, so there's one tattoo that's there, and so it's a layered tattoo. So there's this one right here, and it's Kuan Yin. And then there's the Phoenix right here, of course. And so I thought that was going to take no longer than it did. And so it took like 5.5 hours. And it was only 2 weeks after the first portion. And I was not about to walk around with a half-done tattoo showing. No, I was not. And so because I was not about to walk around with a half-done tattoo showing, because I was in San Antonio, Texas, so it's a little warm, I asked the tattoo artist how much time, when's the next time you're going to be in? And he said Tuesday. And so I said I'd be there Tuesday at 2 p.m. I remember that because, day and time. And so 1400 for clarification. And he, okay, I showed up. And I finished that, or he did the work, but I dealt with another 4.5 hours. So 2 weeks and 2 days, 2 weeks and then 2 days for this particular, yes, I did. And then a couple weeks later for certain other additional details, but the main aspects of that was, I'm a smidgen stubborn by a whole lot. Yeah. So my way or my way or my way or my way. My way, because my way. Anyway, so in reference to how the baby formula regarding the 5 and Gutfeld in that reference, and then the big baby situation regarding the reference to the name of Joe as to Joseph Estes in that particular reference, and the metaphor regarding those situations. in that capacity of if regarding the SeaWorld situation, well, he at SeaWorld tried. I actually had to get up during this point in time because it was the only way I could remain calm. So let me clarify what I did to remain calm. He said this, which I'll go into, and I got up and I was like, oh, well, let me go see the killer whale closer because I need to remain calm. Let me go see this huge killer whale. It's so much cuter. It's such a little baby. Because that's so much easier for me to look at this cute little killer whale, a full grown one, but such a cute little killer whale. Let me spend time with this guy because this cute little killer whale is a cute little killer whale and I like your name right now. So I am such a good person. I have so much self-control. And this is before, literally only a couple weeks before the Taco Cabana situation. He's a cute little killer whale. You're such a cute little killer whale. Yes, you are. So, what had been said was, so we were sitting wherever we were, and he had brought up how he thought we were kind of twins. And I didn't understand how. And he said that we were kind of twins because he had not graduated basic training from the Air Force. So I went to basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Which is a armory base. And so for those who don't know, the Air Force only has one location for enlisted soldiers to go. The Army has multiple locations for enlisted to go because depending on quite a few factors. And so there's that starting point. I had been interested in the infantry and the cavalry and combat arms and MP because I wanted to do recon and scouting. I know it wasn't the Navy SEAL sort of thing, MRAR sort of stuff, but kind of, Okay, fine, I didn't graduate basic training. And he tried to claim that the Lackland Air Force Base basic training was similar. And then he tried to say, but he did, I shouldn't say tried, but he tried to have arrogance. And he said, well, but unlike your 9 days of basic training, I made it through 14 days of basic training. Now, I have already informed this individual that with the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain and how I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math, and how the Navy and the Marine Corps and the special warfare unit, when it was closer to Stanley Road as far as where medical hold unit was, had been teaching me how to count to 10. I didn't fully learn how to count to 10 yet because of how bad the damages were regarding the frontal temporal lobe of my brain. in that reference. And then there's the factors of, well, I think it's the left temporal. I don't remember. It's whichever one that has to do with logical factors in comparison to language and artistic capabilities. And so those particular situations regarding how the medical situations at the time frame regarding that. So I had only been capable to learn how to count to 10. Well, I had informed that I had gone to basic training in the month of March in 2000. And Palm Sunday is in April, pretty much every year. And so for this individual to first and foremost try to compare his basic training, okay, fine, didn't graduate, all right. However, if he did not count before, okay. However, I recently looked at a calendar. I know that I had, but I at that time in 2012, again, Irving was the year before, and then scuba diving was 2.5 years before, and I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and so there's 16 days in April of 2000, because it's the 16th of April that Palm Sunday was in 2000. And so when he had said that his 14 days before he had an issue with his knee, I just decided to go see the killer whale. Because sure, I couldn't count that high. I was dealing with a few things. I wasn't going to look through a few others. So, it's just, though there is still a difference between Army basic training and Air Force basic training. And so even though there's a shorter amount of time for enlisted Air Force basic training compared to Army basic training, in comparison, of course. And then there's Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment situation in addition. So by technicalities, so it's a 9-week basic training for the Army. And I had made it through, I think it's 4 or 4.5 weeks of basic training. Though you do have to take in consideration from September into October into November and December of 1999 because of arguing with Mike and Anna, so that way I could go. And then January and February of 2000. So, it's not the same at all whatsoever. However, compared a merchant marine compared to the Air Force, Mike realistically compared to the Air Force regarding one male, it just wasn't it did not go well. So I did what I could for my self-control. And so the killer whale came and swam up right to where I was standing, and being just a cute little killer whale, show me his little belly. He's a little cute little killer whale. Kept swimming back around, just came right to where I was, and just similar to the Virginia aquarium with the sea lions, and the little sea lions just swimming up and being little cute little fluffy sea lions. Yes. Similarly to in Washington State at the Port of Tacoma, in comparison, they just started talking. And so we talked back and forth and stuff like that. Though I've done that since I was a child. There's the Camden Aquarium. And then there's, later in Corpus Christi, this little, little fat, funny looking, orangey yellow, I don't know what type of species of fish. Doing what he could. He was just so cute. And so it's like a flattened but more orange poofy fish type of look because of how he looked. Though still a little fatty. Because it's so cute. And so I've had that for a while. I mean, I had a ram species, I should clarify, in comparison to the Dodge truck. I went to Enchanted Rock, and I've had several situations. I actually picked up a baby deer because it was as it was. And actually, it's just, I don't know if there's any references in pop culture as far as different species. Nonetheless, I was meditating at Enchanted Rock, and I think it was 2006, and a ram, the curly-Q type of ram, ran up to where I was and then put one hoof backwards and then bowed. And so it's a little fluffy, aren't you a little cutie? Probably not the most normal response, though it is, so, In regards of my 3-volume book series, The Adventures of Susan Me Ling, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, on my website, www.susanmeling.com. Well, you have a few of those examples to compare to the different species in the oceanic waters, as well as some of the hot springs and when it was a lake, but also lake and quarry and stuff like that, because I'm accustomed to that. And so it is as it is. And I mean, there's even my babysitter's husband, Joe Jose. He had 2 different types of macaw birds, and I could get their little tootsies. Mainly Major. I could get Major's tootsie, and I could get his belly sometimes, and I could sometimes get the top of his beak. Sometimes, because he was as he was. The red macaw, that one was that he was as he was. There were a few points where it could be, yes, he's a little baby red macaw. I mean, despite the fact a red macaw was, with the total length of the tail, and it was a full-grown macaw. I mean, I was a child, so technically from the tail to the top of its head, it was as tall as I was. In comparison, so every now and then, and usually it would stick its claw out of the cage. It would twist its claw so that way it could get out of the cage because of how he was. And then he'd pull on my shirt and my pants. He would do it gently. As gently as a macaw bird with those particular types of claws would. Nonetheless, he didn't scratch or make me bleed, so that's a good thing. He just kind of pulled and was like, yes, I see you. I forget his name. Nonetheless, he was as he was. It's nothing new. It's been since my childhood. Nonetheless, in regards of the baby situation and the baby formula and all that particular factor. If any of the needless problems regarding how my son and I wound up in Washington State because of the, situation at Cowboys Dance Hall, Stoney LaRue concert in 2013 with the knowledge of, okay, I didn't discuss Irving in 2011. That's fine. However, it was known about my scuba diving. And while it may not have been known to the depth level at the time, it was known that I landed at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico because of the pictures, as well as it was known that I landed at the bottom of the ocean out, maybe they didn't know out from Boca, okay, fine, but the Vandenberg. And so, there is that factor. And then there was the knowledge of the after effects of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain, dealing with headaches and migraines. Having given birth while I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain in 1.5 years after waking up from my coma, as well as my another birth, still having had that subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain in the 2.5 year point. And so those particular factors, in conjunction to the knowledge that I have memory deficits and cognitive disorders, and went from college algebra, trigonometry, and calculus to second grade math. So realistically, nobody has any right to be that overly emotional about anything regarding their feelings, especially in the time frame of. And so with that knowledge, but this also goes with actual maturity and emotional intelligence in comparison to those types that, overreact instantly because they don't have the internal capacity, especially during that time, from what I had noticed in those references. And so, while there are those types that are that way, again, it does require, when it comes to time frames after, if you don't speak with me in person, face-to-face in person, I'm just gonna be myself anyway. And so a few months after the end of, because of the Taco Cabana situation, I spent about a month away from the events in San Antonio. So that way, because I knew that was the only location that they went to. And I've been involved in multiple locations throughout the state of Texas. So I gave them their space because, after he had been in the bed crying, the way Anna and Patricia cry, I just, you can have that space, You have your wife, go cry to your wife in comparison. And she knew, obviously, it was known then. So then there was a few months later, I think it was 2 months, it was like 1.5, 2 months after the end of the relationship was the 4th of July in 2012. And then I dealt with, Erica, also known as Discordia, come up to me for them because she said she thought that I was being mean to them because I was having fun in comparison to just not even thinking that I didn't even notice them there because of the facts. And so instead of, as a mature adult would have a discussion in comparison, if you saw the individual, that occurred, which reminded me of middle school and high school. And I just didn't have the patience for that. So I didn't even see them. I would have had to find my sunglasses because I wasn't wearing my contacts. So my sunglasses had my prescriptions in the sunglasses lens. And I, they were the sunglasses, if I remember correctly, they're the same sunglasses I wore when I went to Cozumel, as well as out because of my scuba dive mask had my prescription in it regarding the lens. So, being capable to see is important. And I was concerned about wearing contacts in the water because of the knowledge that a mask can flood. So to prevent any issue, because anybody who's worn contacts knows when you have certain situations, if a contact comes out, when you're underwater, I wasn't willing to take that risk with my type of scuba diving. Yeah, if you're in the recreational civilian type of scuba diving, that's one thing. But I wasn't civilian recreational scuba diving. So my scuba dive mask had my prescription in it. So that way I didn't ever have to worry about that because I was not willing to deal with that in the middle. Like, yeah, no. I could totally see it now back then. Go and deal with situations. And then, excuse me, this is the equivalent of people who have stress cards that I've made fun of. Yeah, excuse me, I have to fix my contact. Oh wait, I can't because I have a scuba mask on and being underneath the water, so we are gonna have to do this in a minute when, no, that's just not how that goes. And so I just handled the situation as I did, and it was just easier to get my scuba dive mask with my prescription in it automatically. I paid for it. I was like, I think other than my depth gauge, I think that was my scuba dive mask with my prescription was more expensive than my scuba dive camera because of my prescription being at that level. So I think it was the equivalent of like a course and a half outside of my 16 scuba dive certification. I think it was like the equivalent of the price of my ice scuba diving course and my trimix course, like 1.5 of those fees. Because yeah, that's how because that's my prescription level issue. And so if I don't have my contacts in, similar to now, or if I'm not wearing my eyeglasses, if I don't have the prescription sunglasses, which I can't find those prescription sunglasses right now, nonetheless, if I don't have that on, I don't see the same way. I mean, I think it's like 4.025 or something like that, or 4.5 or whatever it is. And so for those who understand that regarding optometry, that's if I don't wear my contacts or wear my glasses, specifically prescription glasses. If I don't have my contacts in, which I haven't worn contacts since 2017. So if I don't have my eyeglasses on, I don't see you. And just because I might have, it depends on what I'm paying attention to as well. So if I don't have that, you could be there. That's nice. Good for you. This is whatever. That's your choice. If you even if I do have my contacts in or have my eyeglasses on, that's nice. I've known a lot of people over the years and decades, and there are certain people that if they don't know, they have relatives that, kind of have certain similar attributes, and or there's only so many ways to physically look to a degree. So I've known people in New Jersey, New York City, New York State, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Lancaster, Pennsylvania State, Crystal Lake and surrounding towns, Illinois, the Army, and the state of Texas in various areas. So, you know, I've seen a few people. And if you know me, not just the aspects of the after effects from my head injury, but if you know me and you make the choice to think that I should go up to you, but you know, just in reference to the after effects of my head injury, not forgetting, needing to remember the aspects of how many areas I have personally been, then it is you who are snobby because you know that and you think that I should remember you in comparison to taking in consideration those realities. That's my opinion, because in reference to the 4th of July in 2012, it was known that I had lived in DFW before. I had been in San Antonio again. It was known that I'd woken up in San Antonio in 2000, though it was known I moved to Carrollton because of what was going on with my daughter. And then it was known I lived in the Austin area of Texas before going back to the DFW area, before in the San Antonio area, as well as it was known I went to San Marcos for some events as well. So it was one of those, when that was presented to me, it was, well, that's nice. Okay, well, first and foremost, they can say something if they have maturity and etiquette and respect. Otherwise, if they're going to send you because they're having a temper tantrum, I'm not gonna deal with that. No. Because no. Now, in a very different situation, so there's Steel Creek and Tacoma, and at the time of going to Steel Creek, the individual as to how I wound up in Washington State with my son after the Cowboys dance hall had told me that he had seen that Dana Perino supposedly was in Steel Creek. And with the situations that had occurred by that point in time, it was, well, she's eating a dinner. And we had literally just walked in. It wasn't like we had been around hanging out for a while. We had just walked in. And so it was one of those, well, she's eating dinner. I'm not gonna go and disrupt her. Like, what type of savage are you? Just, what, do you have manners at all? Whatsoever? Do you just, though if she really was there, hi Miss Perino, hi Miss Dave. Nonetheless, in comparison, it is what it is. It's more along the lines of where it's like, well, if it was reached out to him and he wasn't my manager. that was not how that, no. and yeah. Because I think that was after the Facebook message situation where they had said on the 5, to answer something, if something, I can't remember what it was, but give your opinion. So I gave this long explanation of different aspects. Yeah, through my original Facebook account. Though at the same time, I also was, it is as it is. It's a few situations combined. And because of, then it was also during the 2016 election cycle, and I didn't want to be rude, especially because I know how I physically look. And I was, even if it was her, I was concerned because I could see certain things and I didn't want to give I am as I am about respect. And so even with the viewpoints as to how some people are regarding political differences, I'm not that type. And so I didn't want to be, because I know how I physically look. And even though being in Washington State, though additionally so in that reference. And so then the news went the way it did in those particular factors, and that's simple things. So, yeah, but if so, hey. I'm not the smartest crayon in the toolbox, so if that's the case. Though, yeah, I just out of respect. So, though there were a lot of other situations that were going on in a combination, oddly, in a few ways. So then there's the irony of the if factor as far as this metaphor regarding like Joseph Estes being like, I totally know everything about her because of what I read on social media. In comparison, and then the same thing in regards of Patrick Kennedy. I'm a smidgen, well, I guess with the updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, kinda gives a little bit of a perspective of a few factors to take in consideration. So yeah. So, but in regards of the state of Texas and the way things went in 2019, so if in regards of if Irving was known regarding 2011, and or if the SeaWorld situation was in reference to my scuba diving, because he worked at Kelly Air Force Base, I don't know what he did, but nonetheless, the situations regarding the U-Haul and my scuba dive gear, which I was going to take to the Navy Marine Special Warfare Unit, in comparison to those particular factors, I have my specifics regarding, so then there's my Medal of Honor art project artwork, and it's supposed to be done a certain way. In comparison, so so I've been doing what I could, because, discussions are important. Yeah, I do the best I can. And so, if you want to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect, and like my official YouTube video and share my official YouTube video links. Go to subscribe to my official YouTube channel and go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. And hopefully, if there's any clarifications and verifications that were needed, well, then there's those additional factors in reference to how my son and I, him having been a minor and my daughter having been a minor, because it was 2013 in regards of those situations. My daughter and my son were in elementary school regarding the Fort Worth Zoo situation. So if in regards of scuba diving, there's only one person to speak with, that would be me, comparison to anybody else. Instead of assuming, if there's any of that social media problems regarding certain types, not paying attention to any details, because that would require you to look past pictures to actual details. However, that would require non-artificial intelligence and actual intelligence, because actual intelligence is important, in my opinion. So, thanks for tuning in. Though, additionally, I can make fun of myself now, though, if it's really something to make fun of. Because if there were people that I once knew in person, face to face in person, who had seen a YouTube video that I'd uploaded because I was making, well, I think I recorded it live actually. I had made attempts to explain what was going on because after so many people that I once knew in person, face to face in person, after so many individuals who could have easily reached out, whether it be through the social media message system or email or whatever, that could have actually assisted. I mean, it realistically, I don't camo at all, so could have actually discussed with me in truth, with etiquette and respect. That was my last option at the time because of how few. And then just before the family court situation, as far as the San Antonio family court. So the only time I had ever, at any point in time, shown emotion in that larger capacity. I mean, there were times where I shed a few tears, yes, but I did what I could not to when discussing with people in person, face to face in person. There were times I did. I'd actually have to trust you enough to actually speak with you about it in person, face to face in person. Though there were a few situations. So one was in a San Marcos event. I was talking with a couple at the time, and it was shortly before the San Antonio family court. And so I was doing what I could to maintain composure. There was an individual named Craig who had a temper tantrum. Instead of paying attention to the fact that it was me being a mom dealing with it in comparison to other factors. And so, when it comes to finding a silver lining and finding the silver lining, did the best that I could. So if other people I once knew in person, face to face in person, had thought it was funny, I hope that whenever finding a silver lining came out, you really thought about whatever it is that you may have said and or discussed, and then the comparisons. And so then there's my journal blog updates regarding the ornery PSA, which whatever clarifications and verifications of. And so choices are choices. And so made the best attempts I could with everything I was dealing with that I could, as I've explained through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com. I did the best I could regarding finding a silver lining, as far as without the emotional, without the opinions, and without the biases, because of the requirement for, and in reference to finding the silver lining, knowing that those situations, 9 out of 10, probably had more than one person who could relate to that, because it's not like the state of Texas is the only location in the United States of America or the world that can have certain similarities to those references. I know that there's the Lone Star State viewpoint if you're going to do the MK Ultra version of that, though there are other states in the United States of America and other cities in the United States of America's various states, and there's other countries in the world that could have certain references regarding certain types of situations, because through Amazon, as far as that's concerned. So, there's that. Hopefully that clarifies and verifies. So if I was considering that converse sort of way, if I was considered a baby, well, now there's 2020 in March, which is an irony of the Stoney LaRue concert at Cowboys Dance Hall was in March, but 2019 or 2013 in that reference. Though I don't know what the time frame was in regards of the specific day for that weekend. Nonetheless, there is the fact that in 2020 in March is when the COVID situation began officially. And so individuals, if accurate now, the 25th of May, 2022, if there were those who thought I had been a baby over what I was going through and dealing with, by myself, because there wasn't anybody that I had in person, face-to-face in person with me, who had actually assisted me in the correct capacities. There wasn't anybody with me at my side regarding the multitude of situations combined and dealing with that. I'm the one who authored and wrote and compiled everything on my own and without any assistance, except for through the Amazon situation and LegalZoom for my legal copyright, because they're my legal copyright for my life and my life experiences, as I've explained and clarified and verified in reference to my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, because of the facts. And so my creativity, my work, all that stuff, and bibliography, because my work, bibliographies are in the back pages, as far as that's concerned, just for that clarification. And that's Superman Comics' legal factor of protection rights for me in my favor. And so that is as it is, because it would be known in Finding the Silver Lining, I didn't name names of anybody at all. If there were others that decided to out themselves to one another, well, that was their choices. I didn't make anybody do that. And again, I knew I couldn't be the only person who had situations or those particular factors of certain similarities in different areas. So, nonetheless, I'm sure, my scuba diving, well, that's just me. And Irving, no, that's just me. Now, if I had people in my life that had been on a consistent basis, in person, face-to-face in person, that I could actually trust in comparison to what I was dealing with, well, maybe I would have gone over the Irving situation in 2011. However, because of 2004 and my San Antonio backyard as far as that's concerned, it just seemed worthless to speak with anyone about it, you know, because of the way that situation was at those times. So since those people regarding my ex-in-laws and my biological mother and my biological father and my biological sister chose to be the way they chose to be, well, it was worthless for me to speak with anybody about those particular factors. Why waste my time? I was already dealing with what I was dealing with by that point in time. And, 2011, I mean, who did I have in my life that I actually could trust? That was a biological adult that I could actually trust in person, face to face in person, with those particular factors. Because if the wishful thought would be Patrick, well, I have a few situations I listed out in this official YouTube video, as well as prior official YouTube videos of mine that would negate that. Such as the Bank of America Tower. Not just the phone call situation, a few other factors to that. Not just the Dominant Mentor Program, a few other factors to that. And not just the exotic Easter situation regarding Temple of Flesh. Quite a few other factors to that. So, who would I have had in my life, in person, face to face in person, to speak with, tell about, that I actually could trust, to discuss with about those factors? For the answer for this official YouTube video of mine regarding this lecture, well, there wasn't anyone that was a biological adult that I could speak with about it at all. And since I had made multiple attempts in reference to scuba diving, well, between my daughter's best interests and my son's best interests and my best interests in the year of 2011, after what occurred regarding 2009, I just didn't have the patience at all. So yes, later in 2012, I dated someone that I had once known in person, face to face in person. Several years before, I knew in 2009. And yeah, there was the online whatever. However, that was 3 years before. And so, sure, we were friends and all that and whatnot, and beforehand. However, my scuba diving, and since he has a military background, he should know, from what I was told. And then, common sense would be just to be straightforward and to the point as a mature biological adult, instead of hesitating, and so then a few other situations in that particular regard where it would have been much easier to just speak with in person, face to face in person in comparison, but yes, while there was some online because of social media, that's not my preference, and we met in scuba diving, so there's a certain common sense factor regarding a few situations. And so when you do scuba diving, and you actually go scuba diving, you actually do that in person, face to face in person. in comparison to in writing. Yet again, regarding that social media situation. So, it's important to actually pay attention to detail. So I made multiple attempts. I didn't, ever hide. Didn't ever pretend to be someone else. Always have been myself. So, is as it is during those points in time. And so, could just have asked all those years from, in reference to my scuba diving, as, even while making attempts to speak with regarding, nonetheless, from 2009 through 2013, I mean, there is the fact that I had discussed some of the scuba stuff at the Cowboys Dance Hall. During that Stoney LaRue concert. Before the corset situation. Or I should say after. Well, technically both, because there were a few people I spoke with. Nonetheless. So, I've always been open to discussions. I suppose maybe I'm just the only one who's been open to discussions. Maybe. I suppose. I made attempts though. So, thanks for, I really don't know what other people would think would be open to discussions beyond how many attempts I have made. And so, but I made these attempts, and so, in honesty and comparison to, that if in that reference of hinting, so then there's those problems regarding my Medal of Honor art project trips, if anything having to do with Sapphire. So if the hinting regarding the name Sapphire, Club Sapphire with the white background to the blue tie, and or the lighting, because that, whether in reference to Temple of Flesh, the original location that I had attended as far as the Blue Ballroom, though I suppose technically, and then, and or the situation regarding Joseph Estes, Megan Estes' house. Well, Sapphire is my children's birthstone. It's the month of September birthstone, and there's these important details that I've had to clarify and verify for my updates to my website through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmuling.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, to be capable to assist with the other factors, because if my biological mother and or biological father actually had wanted answers, the way everybody else might, regarding 11 September 2001, there wouldn't have ever been a hesitation for me to go out to the East Coast. If my biological sister has been too ignorant to actually put that together, similarly to 9 days to the 16th of April and that, well, that's a whole other ball of wax. So that's something she'd have to think about as far as that's concerned, because who could ever have actually lived for over a decade or more in the New Jersey area and knowing my childhood, who would ever hesitate to get out to the East Coast unless there was some hypothetical situation, such as my biological mother, who informed me, and for this clarification, my biological mother was at McHenry County Government Center in Illinois. And when I was on the phone, if I remember correctly, I was in front of the Gateway computer at the time, when my biological mother had said she had known an entire floor of people who had been capable to escape the World Trade Center, an entire floor, because they had been practicing for airplanes to fly into the World Trade Center Twin Towers. So common sense would be, if there was actual concern about people, such as Old Tennant Presbyterian Church, congregants, and their connections, well then of course I would have been taken to the area immediately. Correct? Then again, that's only if there isn't any needless drama that Mike, Anna, and/or Patricia, and/or Mike's in-laws stirred up in the state of Texas. Similarly to stirred up in Illinois. Similarly to that area at the tri-state area. I made attempts repeatedly throughout the time frame of, more importantly, 2001 through 2012, similarly to scuba diving, and 2004 and all these other situations. So you can think about that as far as that's concerned. So go to my website, www.susanmuling.com, also known as www.ladydoribell.com. Today is the 25th of May, 2022. And if you want to take in consideration who would be the big baby in that reference then. 25 May 2022.